Hello everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the webinar and thank you all for attending. We're very happy to see you all. Firstly, we're going to run through a couple of housekeeping things. So you can type questions into the Q&A box at any time, and we would really encourage your participation. So please send in messages or questions, but I would just want everyone to be aware that we probably won't have time to answer everything, although we are going to use any questions or comments to inform future webinars, so please do get involved. The hashtag for the event is hashtag Suzzan Blac, spelt with 2 Z's. So if you're following the event along on Twitter, please do use the hashtag and get involved, live tweeting or anything. So I'd like to say that we're thrilled to have Suzzan Blac with us here this evening. Suzzan Blac is an English artist from Birmingham who uses her own traumatic experiences of child abuse, rape, pornography, and prostitution to create artworks to expose the ugly and violent truth about the sex industry. And a quote from Suzzan that I particularly like is, "My art is war." So I think that kind of sums up what she's aiming to do with her project. And she's also conducted extensive research into the dark world of online pornography. We're going to start the talk with a kind of hour-long film that we've recorded earlier, where Suzzan is going to show and discuss 24 of her paintings. And she's also going to present to us her research on the pornography industry. And then after that talk, we're going to have a discussion and a Q&A session. So I'm going to just give a quick content warning as well, that the film includes paintings of quite a graphic and gory nature. But I would say that there's not going to be any actual images or photography of violence or pornography, but just as a warning. So without further ado, we're going to show the film, and I hope you will enjoy it.
Okay, so I want to thank Nordic Model for having me on here, and thank everybody who's come to join us. So I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse, physical abuse. I saw much violence when I was a child, every day. Numerous sexual assaults and rapes, and I was also abducted into sex trafficking when I was 16 years old. So this had been my life, my normal. It was all that I knew. Every day it was all that I knew, and it was so normal that I didn't even realize that I'd ever even been abused and been a victim for the majority of my childhood and teens and right into my 20s. And I only began to acknowledge and understand this in my late 20s, and finally I sought counselling when I was 33 years old, and that was very hard. Recovery was extremely traumatic, and it took me over 20 years to overcome the worst of it. I mean, I've come to the stage now where I can manage it, and one of the reasons it took so long to recover was the victim blaming that many people inflicted upon me. In my experience, victim blaming is as painful and distressing as the abuse itself. So I went through a lot of counselling, and then because you think when you go to counselling you'll get better and you'll get over it, but that's not how it works. And I was still feeling a lot of trauma, and I felt like my head, it was all inside my head. And so I decided between 2000 and 2004, in order to try and help myself better process this pain and this madness that was inside my head, I decided to paint my story of abuse to help me. And I began by drawing like subconscious doodles, like while I was watching TV, because I knew I couldn't put thought into it, no logical thought. It had to be from deep within me, from my true feelings. So then I turned these doodles into realistic paintings. So that all of this inside my head would be turned into something tangible, something I could see and maybe help me. So I between 2000 and 2004, I painted 40 images of my story. And I painted, I mean, they're all kind of self-portraits. So I painted me, the victim, and them, the perpetrators. I kind of wanted to confront it. And that's the only way I could do it, through my art. And sometimes I was actually shocked by what I painted, but I knew these were my true feelings, my deep feelings, and they were never ever meant for anyone to see, ever, because, well, especially knowing that I would be condemned for them, because I'd shown drawings in the past, and people would be horrible and say horrible things. So I never wanted to show them. But in 2011, I decided to put them online. I had other works out there, but I knew that silence impairs the victims and empowers the perpetrators. So I knew I had to speak out. I had to speak out about sexual abuse and rape and all of the violence against girls and women. So I put them out there, and many people made really hurtful comments. I mean, I was called all kinds of names, from witch, they call me a witch, Satanist, mental, just horrible. But I also had hundreds of comments from other survivors from all over the world, and that was fantastic. And they thanked me for giving them a voice, because these sexual violence is unspeakable. So they all thanked me and could identify with what I was painting. So I also, years later, in 2014, well, since 2014, I've also used my art, or some of my art, in training police and social workers in child sexual abuse, exploitation, and also, importantly, victim blaming. I also paint, I mean, after I painted that, about sexual conditioning, sexual objectification, pornography, prostitution, and misogyny. And I think I am motivated by my pain, my anger, because I had a lot of anger, injustice, and indignation surrounding violence against girls and women, and of course victim blaming. Okay, so I'm now going to show you 24 of my works, with a very brief description, because we haven't got much time. But if you'd like to see all of my art, it is online, and there is a link in the description. So, okay, so the first painting I'm going to show you is called The Trusted Uncle. So this painting depicts my mother's brother, who sexually abused me as a baby. I painted it like a happy family portrait, like, you know, you've seen people's homes, and in my own home there were family portraits everywhere. But I painted it like this because I wanted to convey the lies and cover-ups of family members who knew that it was happening. It also conveys the horrific fact that babies are sexually abused and raped, especially since the invention of the internet and mobile phone cameras. Because actually a lot of people, when I spoke about this, just wouldn't believe me and didn't want to know. And one person actually told me that I was sick for painting this image. So that's the first image. And the second image I'm going to show you is called One of My Mother's Boyfriends. So this painting depicts one of my mother's boyfriends. She had a lot of boyfriends, and in fact, she was married 6 times during my childhood and teens. And this one was the main perpetrator, because he sexually abused me from between 6 and 8 years old. He was also extremely violent. And in this image, this depicts the time that I watched in absolute horror and terror as he beat my mother to a pulp in front of me and my siblings. And no child should ever have to witness such violence. I mean, this stayed with me for an awful long time. The next picture is called You're Such a Good Girl. And this was the first time that anyone had ever called me a good girl. It was the first time in my life anyone called me that. He also told me that it was all my fault because I was so pretty. And here I'm trying to express what sexual abuse was doing to me internally, whilst I remained frozen and detached throughout the abuse. Because when you're being abused, many of us, and me myself, I didn't want to be there in that physically, so I detached my mind, and I used to look at like squiggles on wallpaper and wood grain and force myself to make faces out of it, but all the time I remained detached. I was still internalizing all of that trauma. The next painting is called She Likes It. And this image depicts the first time mother's boyfriend actually sexually abused me in front of her. He had called me into their bedroom one morning, onto the bed, and he was in the bed, and she was sat at her dressing table doing her makeup. And at one point he started abusing me in front of her, and at one point she turned around and she asked him why he was doing that, and he replied, because she likes it. And he laughed and said, because I'll never forget these words. What he said: "What's the matter, love? You jealous?" He said, "There's plenty to go around." And I can remember I searched her face for a reaction, for something. I thought she would get so angry that she was going to kill him and stop it, and there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing in her face, and all she did was tut and carried on putting on her makeup, and that was when I knew this was not going to stop, that it was okay and was to become my normal. And in some respects, she was more of a monster than he was. The next painting I'm going to show you is called Playtime. Now, this image depicts my childhood, although at the time I didn't feel like a child. I felt like an entity that existed just to survive every day, every hour, and every minute, because that's what you do. You're just in constant survival mode, because you don't know what's coming next. And he destroyed my childhood, and he destroyed my innocence. And still to this day, I get very emotional when I watch like small children like playing, like just innocently playing, because he took that from me and he put me in the darkest of places. So after many years of sexual abuse from others, including that, I mean, there were strangers and there were people I trusted, even a teacher. Everybody abused me, everybody, and I just took it. And as I said, that was normal. It was everybody's normal around me. So that went on for years, and I'd become a teenager that was on a path of self-destruction. So these next paintings depict the devastating consequences of all those years of abuse. So the next picture I'm going to show you is called Embracing Death. So by the age of 14, I was regularly drinking, taking drugs and partying. I mean, I took LSD for a decade. That was my escapism. And I was also highly promiscuous and self-harming. I was called a slag, slut, and a whore. And yes, I was. And just one night, I lay on the piss-flooded floor of a nightclub toilet. I felt like I was home. I was disgusting, filthy, vile, and this is where I belonged. I was so intoxicated that I thought I was going to die, but I embraced the thought because I hated my life, I hated humans, and I hated myself. The next picture I'm going to show you is called Demonic Whispers. And this painting depicts the time that I was sex trafficked when I was 16 years old. And this is a portrait of the man alongside others who threatened, hurt, and repeatedly raped me. I'd been taken to London under the pretense of modelling. He said he was a manager of a modelling agency in London, and we had met and gone to London, and he took me, and I was locked inside. It looked like a once former Victorian hotel, like but with boarded up windows. And I mean, there was a bar downstairs, and there were lots of men there, and there were other girls and women there, and the lights were on 24/7. It was I mean, I never even heard of sex trafficking. I didn't know what was going to happen to me at all, but I knew it was bad. So yes, we were forced into pornography and prostitution. So this was a whole new level of abuse, absolute terror and trauma, and one that has always stayed with me. It will never, I mean, although I'm not as traumatized as I was, I still have moments of and flashbacks of these times. The next picture I'm going to show you is called Tell Me You Love It. So on the first night that this man abducted me, we were all kind of in a bar with these other men, and they were just laughing and drinking. And then he asked me to go up to his room to sign some papers, a modelling contract. You know, you think at 16 that you're grown up and you know everything, but no, you don't. So he got me into this room. It looked like a hotel room, but the window was boarded up and there was no TV. And he told me to take all of my clothes off. And so I did what he told me, and I knew what was going to happen to me. So he instantly and viciously raped me. And whilst he was raping me, he forced me to repeatedly tell him that I loved it. That was very hard, very hard. So the next painting is called I've Killed Bitches Before. So after raping me, he told me to get dressed, and as I did, he suddenly lunged at me. He grabbed me by the throat and shoved me against a wall, and he had this huge knife, which he kind of pushed it up inside underneath my rib cage. I mean, he didn't pierce me, but he kind of pushed it up in there, and he seized into my ear. I've killed bitches that misbehaved before, so you need to think about that. And my only thoughts were, I'm only 16 and this is how I die. I'm going to die. I thought I was going to die right then. And still shaken in absolute terror, he suddenly withdrew the knife and he was pointing at me, and laughing in my face and saying, "You should see your face." I mean, this was pure sadism. And I could never, even in counseling, I could never speak about the details of this, how this affected me, because there's just no words. There are no words. And that's why I had to express myself through my paintings. So the next painting I'm going to show you is called Pornographic Meat. So on the second day, I mean, I was also raped by another man that night, and of course, once they do that, they own you. You are owned. You're no longer human. They can do anything they want to you. I mean, I was just a girl with a load of adult men, these sadistic, violent men. And I didn't know at any time I could die. I just didn't know what was going to happen to me. But on the second morning, I was taken to this huge room, huge, massive room full of men. And there was, I was told to put on something sexy. And in the corner, there was like a huge hamper full of lingerie, and there were some other girls, and some were younger than me, and I could not detach. It was, I didn't know what they were going to do, and I was absolutely petrified. And all I could do was what I describe as I became a fleshed robot, or a dead actress, that obeyed their every command. Whatever they told me to do, I'd do. And the other girls and I didn't speak or even make eye contact. We were too scared, absolutely terrified. And the first thing they made us do was to sit down on these couches with them, to watch films of the worst kind of pornography, which included bestiality and sadism and child abuse. And I remember one of the men joked that he was going to get the popcorn. I mean, they were just all laughing, and thought it was funny. So they made us do that, and then after that they began filming us in different areas of this room. And when they began filming me, one of the men asked for butcher shots, and I immediately turned inside out and started crying. I cried for me, and I cried for those other girls, because we were no longer human beings. We were just pieces of meat inside this abattoir. The next painting I'm going to show you is called Shut Up and Take It. It's a long story, but eventually this one of the this image depicts one of the traffickers. He snuck me out there and took me back home on a train. And in the train toilet, he violently raped me 3 times between London and Birmingham. And we were stood up. He raped me standing up, and as I whimpered, he shushed me and he covered my mouth and told me that this was part of the deal, so shut up and take it. He then, after the train journey, he drove me back to my flat, and asked me just tons of questions about my family and my boyfriend, his work hours, and told me that I would be seeing him again soon. The next painting I'm going to show you is called The End of Everything. So after I got home, I never told a soul about what happened to me. I just lied. I lied. I said that I had a great time, you know, modeling and doing a portfolio and having dinners and taken out and about. I just lied. I was still so traumatized and I knew that it was all my fault. I'd done this. It was my fault. And also, I was also being terrorized by that trafficker who said he was coming back for me. So I had to internalize all of that pain and fear. And after a while, I deteriorated, both mentally and physically. And the first thing I did, I cut all off my hair. I had waist length hair, and I cut it off, all off to like a quarter of an inch, because I didn't want to be pretty anymore. My weight dropped to 6 stone. I couldn't eat. I didn't want to eat. I developed intestinal worms, severe cystitis where I bled, boils, cankers, and weeping eczema that covered my entire body. All my clothes were stuck to me, and it was torture. Just the itching, and it was awful. It also turned septic. That's why I ended up in a hospital, because I actually developed septicemia. But one night, I sat naked in the shower tray, and I poured a bottle of cochineal, red food coloring, like all over me. And I was just rocking and crying that I needed to die. I needed to die to stop this. That was the only way out for me. So that leads me on to the next painting, called The Epitome of Sorrow is to Die Alone. So this painting depicts one of my suicide attempts. I mean, I had depression, and I actually thought all along, for all those years, I thought that I was just mentally ill, because I didn't think about me being an abuse victim or anything. I just thought I was mentally ill. And one night I'd taken all of my clothes off and lay down on I'd moved by that time out of that flat to a high-rise on a council estate. So I lay down on this 9th floor balcony one winter's evening after failing to jump off. I was hoping to die of hypothermia, because I tried to jump off, but I'd stood on this chair and it wobbled, and I was too scared. I couldn't do it. So I lay there, and I lay on this icy. It was icy. I think it was December. It's icy concrete floor, and I remember hot tears like running down my freezing face as I thought how awfully sad it was to have to die alone. And I must have, I did. I fell asleep, and then I woke up at dawn, and slowly got up. I could hardly walk, and I walked into my lounge, and although the heating wasn't on, it was like walking into a furnace. And I saw my reflection in a mirror, and it was so surreal. I mean, I looked like a wax model, covered in these blue and green veins. So I just curled up into my bed, and I was just so sad that I wasn't dead. Which leads me on to the next painting called No One Asked Me Why. So this image depicts the time I was in a Birmingham hospital. Someone had taken me to the hospital because I blacked out in a pub. Someone had taken me to the pub. I didn't want to go because I took all my medication. I took an overdose of all my medications. So it's a long story, but he got me to a hospital. And the staff, I remember, I came I came to just like that, like instantaneously, and all these doctors and nurses were like snapping off their gloves, and I could tell they were angry with me. So after they discharged me, and I walked away from the hospital, I began to cry. I mean, not one person in there had asked me why. I mean, they asked me other questions, my name and address and stuff, but they never asked me why I'd done this to myself. And it was then I knew that even doctors and nurses didn't give a shit about me. They didn't care if I died. I mean, they just did their job. So that was I did try other times to commit suicide, but I'm very, very glad that I didn't. So my next painting is called I Am a Piece of Shit, and this painting depicts how others throughout my life made me feel whenever I disclosed what had happened to me, and but I was condemned, isolated, abandoned, judged, or not believed, or made to feel guilty or ashamed, and that a lot of it was my own fault. And this is how many people make victims and survivors of sexual abuse feel. If someone says, I mean, you know, like if someone says they were robbed or mugged or beaten up, there's automatically there is sympathy and empathy, and you can talk about it, but not if you're a victim of sexual abuse. People don't want to hear that, and of course, because of victim blaming, you are silenced. And you're literally treated like a piece of shit. So the next painting, hold on a sec. The next painting is called I'm Fine, Thank You. So I painted this self-portrait to show how it felt to constantly hide myself by having to wear a mask, either for self-protection or social acceptance, because people made me feel like an outcast if I ever spoke out about any of the crimes committed against me as a child. Even I would be met with a wall of silence, made to feel uncomfortable or defective or dysfunctional. And no survivor of sexual abuse should ever have to hide their pain, anxiety, and distress in the fear of being re-victimized. No human being should ever have to feel what I have painted here. And this is actually, for me personally, this is the painting I hate the most. So now I want to show you some of my other works, ones that I painted years after this my story of abuse. So the next painting is called Your Suffering is Real. So I painted this image of myself. It is a self-portrait to express and convey how severe continuous sexual trauma impacts your mental health, your body, and your very soul. Because sexual violence is unlike any other kind of violence, and I know I've been subjected to every other kind of violence. It's like a blackness that creeps inside your every vein and permeates every organ until you emotionally shut down, and you're no longer the human being that you once were, and you're unable to speak of the horrors. You outwardly smile whilst hiding the truth that you are internally destroyed. And I wanted to speak about this painting because so many people I see online don't seem to understand it, and some people have been quite horrible about it. So yeah, the next painting is called The Prostituter. So this image represents the men who prey on vulnerable girls and women. And these are the pimps and pornographers who target what they like to say, what I've heard them say is bent but not broken girls. You know, they know because they are predators, they know their prey, and they know when a girl and a woman is vulnerable. And they are men on the streets, men online, sex traffickers, husbands, boyfriends, and fathers. And the majority of these girls and women are victims of previous sexual abuse, rape, and domestic violence. And many have mental health issues and are often alcohol and drug dependent. And this is why I think a lot of people, when they think of, I mean, they've changed the language now from prostitution to sex work. So a lot of people assume, just like in pornography, that most of these women, it's a consensual deal. They do it for money, and it's not a problem. But people need to know that many are not. Many are broken girls and women. The next painting I want to show you is "Let Me Entertain You." So this image depicts the sexual and physical violence that's now commonplace in mainstream pornography. It never used to be. I mean, before the internet, you could only buy violent pornography illegally at one point. I mean, most pornography magazines, especially in the UK, were of women solo or with partners, and you could not buy violent pornography. But now it is rife on the internet and in mainstream pornography. And women are being humiliated, degraded, hogtied, raped, punched, kicked, suffocated with plastic bags, strangled, tortured, and even hanged. And I mean, for real, it's not acting, it is real. I think people, a lot of people think that pornography is studio professional made, and believe me, it's not. A significant number of videos are homemade by boyfriends and husbands and sexual offenders. They're not about sex. These are crimes committed against women. And these videos are the stuff of serial killer fantasies. I've researched a lot about serial killers and sexually motivated crimes and murders, and this is their fantasies. And before, if they could not get a hold of the violent pornography, they would actually adapt, say they would buy normal pornography, and they would draw onto the images, women being hanged. They would draw a noose or draw them tied up or being tortured, because that was their fantasy. And now it's become a reality. They really do these things to women in mainstream pornography. And the only thing that they don't do to women is actually kill them. Which brings me to the next painting. Hang on a sec. This is called What Women Want. I painted this in 2013, and this image depicts a young boy, because as we know, children are watching pornography now on their phones, on the Xbox, everywhere and anywhere, even at school. So this image depicts a young boy watching this kind of sexual violence on their mobile phones. That's a giant mobile phone. And for the first time in history, boys are viewing this horrific and hateful misogyny and violence against women, which has become so normalized and eroticized. So much so that I think boys are completely desensitized to it. Many also use pornography on their phones to sexually harass, intimidate, and exert power over girls. I think pornography alters and influences sexual behaviors and also reinforces misogyny in young, malleable minds. And this is why the government needs to implement age verification now. They shouldn't be waiting. They should be doing it now. So the next painting I'm going to show you is called Blue Hair. And this painting is one of a set of 6 images I did for a show in London named A Basement of Dolls. And these depict issues that affect women and girls, such as sexual conditioning, sexual objectification, and sexual exploitation. So right from birth, baby girls are objectified and conditioned. Not all of them, I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them are. And so you've got baby girls who you know, they're covered in bows and ribbons and lace and even like frilly nappy pants. I mean, why would you do that? You know, they don't do this to boys, they do it to girls. You've got toddlers that wearing sassy clothes, jewelry, heels, and painted nails. And many little girls are only given like girly toys, housework sets, makeup and hairstyle sets. You know, they're not given a choice. They're not given other things, you know, like you know, Lego or Meccano or a microscope, or they should have choices. And girls are taught that only being attractive and pretty are valued, and this stays with them. This often stays with them. And many teenage girls and young women resort to extreme diets, Botox, and dangerous cosmetic surgeries because they don't match up to the high standards of beauty. So going on to the next picture, which is called Blondes. So again, this is about the sexual objectification of little girls everywhere, in books, in the media, in film, like dance studios, and even by their own parents, like entering them into those horrific beauty pageants. I mean, I watch those and they're absolutely horrifying. I mean, for me, this is child abuse. Like that toddlers and tiaras, absolutely horrific. They've got them in like stripper clothes, doing stripper moves. It's absolutely horrific. And they were, I don't know if they still do, but the time I painted these pictures, these parents were buying Playboy merchandise for them. You know, you could get pencil cases and pillows and toys, and for little girls. I mean, the Playboy was merchandise was sold to girls as young as 8, like in high street stores. So that brings me to the next painting, which is called Black Hair. So this painting specifically depicts the young women who enter the porn industry. And I mean, many of these girls are 18 years old, and you know that you're still a kid, right? Anyone older than 30 would say that 18-year-olds are kids. So a lot of these girls enter the porn industry, and many do, and I've evidenced this in my blog, because of mental health issues and oppressed religious backgrounds. And then you've got like coercive boyfriends, they call, you know, like suitcase pimps. And there's many different reasons they enter. And they enter this world of grown adult men who love fresh young meat. And a lot of these pornographers make them like even appear younger, like children. You know, they put braces on their teeth and pigtails and children's clothes and have them in child-themed bedrooms. And then they get you know, the biggest man or men, like a gang of men, and have them punished. You know, a lot of the titles are teen punished and destroyed. And then many of these young women, they leave after a short period of time, even some after the first shoot, because they're so traumatized. And that trauma continues because their videos remain online for all to see indefinitely, so that they will be forever, ever traumatized. So it brings me to the next painting. I think it's the last painting, which is called The Life Giver. And this is a recent painting. So this represents sexism and misogyny. So I portray a history of derogative and sexist terms used for many different reasons: to silence, erase, hurt, subordinate, humiliate, degrade, hate, and punish women. Now, my point here was, I think it was a couple of years ago I painted this, that no one is morally or legally allowed to make racial, homophobic, or transphobic slurs, as they are deemed hate crimes. But you can call women anything you like, because misogyny is not actually a hate crime. Well, since this painting, it is now classed as a hate crime. But whether those crimes will be recorded is, well, that remains to be seen. So that's all of the paintings. If you want to see more, then I think there's a link in the description to my website. Okay, so now I'd like to talk about pornography, because of all the harms done to girls and women, pornography is the most damaging and far-reaching. Not just the victims within the porn industry, but those outside of it. I first saw pornography when I was 6 years old. It was shown to me by one of my mother's boyfriends, as he sexually abused me. And throughout my childhood and teenage years, every older boy and man who sexually abused and raped me had pornography. And of course, the sex traffickers who forced me to pornography. So I knew there was a connection between sex offending and pornography. And over the years, and in my obsession with perpetrators, as to why and how they could so easily abuse and harm girls and women, I researched, for years I researched sex offending, rapes, kidnapping, torture, and sexually motivated murderers. I noticed that there was a high pornography use, which was a significant, well, a prime factor in their offending, because it is fantasy, which is their prime motivation in their offending. So I began writing about this in my blog, The Violence of Pornography, in 2016, documenting such cases, an awful lot. Even I've documented so far 80 murders that involved pornography, a high use of pornography. I mean, they would even take pornography with them to murder these women, or actually film their own pornography whilst raping and killing these women. So I also read about research surrounding the aggression in pornography, and, you know, just like text, a lot of text written about pornography. And whenever I post about this on social media, I would be attacked mainly by men online, and some would laugh and say, "Oh, you've never even seen any pornography." Well, yes, that was true. I hadn't seen any pornography since I'd been sex trafficked in 1977, and I would be absolutely traumatized if I ever saw it or accidentally saw it, or a picture even. But in 2017, I decided that I had to watch it. I had to watch it because how could I speak out against pornography if I'd never even seen it? So I decided, okay, this is a day I'm going to watch it. And I watched and screenshot hundreds of videos on the most popular mainstream pornography site, which is Pornhub. I mean, Pornhub has 115 million hits a day. And that's why I chose Pornhub. And like many women who didn't watch porn, I had no idea about its true content. You kind of just assume that much of it is adults having consensual sex, professionally made, and there might be a bit of, you know, hair pulling and slapping going on. But how wrong was I? I could not believe it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I thought that these things could only be seen on the dark web. I was horrified and mortified. There are thousands and thousands of videos and thousands of comments, which I also screenshot. And I watch women being sexually and violently abused, humiliated, degraded, raped, and tortured. These were not sex videos. They were, as I said before, crime. I felt like I was watching crime scene videos. There were women being raped when they used their safe words, like in the kink videos. They were completely violated. There were women that were sleeping or passed out from alcohol or high on drugs. I've seen drug addicted prostitutes unaware that they were being filmed, like it would be in the man's car. And they were so out of it, they wouldn't even know they were being filmed. I watch women being suffocated with plastic bags, waterboarded, strangled manually or with ligatures. Women being really hanged, I mean really hanged with ropes and nooses around their necks. Many are professional videos, but a significant number of it is of users' content, which is uploaded onto Pornhub like you would onto YouTube. And often with no consent from the women appearing in the video. I watched one man film a woman with her neck in a noose. It's like a mobile phone video, a lot of them are. And so she was stood on a chair, and he would kick the chair and let her hang, let her drop. She dropped just for a few seconds, and then he'd pick her up and place her back on the chair. And then he kept doing it, kicking her and picking her back up again and again. And I was absolutely mortified. I couldn't believe, I just couldn't believe it. But her, she, you know, she did protest sometimes, but other times she had no expression at all. Like she was glazed over. I could see she was being traumatized. It was absolutely horrific. I watched a tied up naked female being shot continuously for 15 minutes with an automatic BB gun, well, rifle. And then he zoomed in at the end, he zoomed in onto her body, and it was just covered in these bloody, bruised indentations. And then there were lots of comments at how great it was. And men saying, oh, I masturbated to that. It was fantastic. It was so unbelievable. I thought these were only on the dark web, like I said. I've watched women's breasts tortured with all sorts of instruments and needles through the nipples, and cigarettes being stubbed out on the nipples, or breasts that were already like heavily bruised, different staging of bruising all over their breasts and their body, being punched by a man as hard as he could. Or women like breasts being put on a table, and men in boots like standing on them. And I've watched women having their genitalia whipped with nettles, or the nettles being inserted into their vaginas. And I've watched women being whipped, like sharp whipped, with very thin whips and wires, like on their breasts and nipples, but also on their vaginas and labias. And some of it, I was absolutely mortified. You could see the deep lacerations, like blood and a bit of flesh. And there are also live requests to have these women tortured in whatever way they want. And there's just millions of views and endless derogatory comments, loving the torture, but they're loving seeing women suffer and in pain and screaming. And they're not just loving it, but masturbating to this material. There are tons of like domestic violence videos, mostly homemade by men on mobile phones, abusing their wives and their girlfriends. And that is very disturbing. And you can see, like, I remember one in particular, he was just throwing her, she was like a rag doll, and he was just positioning her, and she wasn't participating. She was nothing. She was just glazed over, and you could tell she was detached. No body language, no expression, nothing. It absolutely awful. I also frequently came across child sexual abuse imagery, and some of it was real children. Obviously, like on YouTube, you get recommended videos, like little thumbnails, and I could see that they were children. I mean, obviously, I never clicked on them. And there's also very realistic CGI child abuse imagery of men raping children, little girls mainly. I did report this to the Internet Watch Foundation, but they just mentioned something about their MindGeek servers are in Luxembourg, and they couldn't, I didn't hear back from them anyway. There's also a significant number of men sexually offending in real life situations. So these were men with mobile phones, actual sex offenders, say filming their offences and then uploading them onto Pornhub. So the offences range from like upskirting, secret like toilet filming, or dressing rooms, for example, indecent exposure, to masturbating and ejaculating onto unsuspecting women, like on the back of their hair and shoulders and or their skirts. And there's an incredible amount of criminal activity on Pornhub. I also watched, so disturbing, disabled women, amputees, women with no arms, legs or both, women with spina bifida, polio, paraplegic, thalidomide, with titles such as "Slutty Wheelchair Bitch Has Crazy Leg Spasms," or "Incontinent Paraplegic Pisses Diaper," or "Mentally Retarded Bitch." There's a lot of that on, and there's so many views, and you can't ascertain the views because the same video can have 2 million views, but then it's uploaded with another title with 600,000 views and another, so you can't ever ascertain the true viewing figures. I'd also like to talk about how common strangulation is on Pornhub. I mean, the kink community, they've changed the language. It's no longer strangulation. The kink community like to call it breath play, and that can be suffocation or strangulation or hanging. Or choking. Quite often I call it choking, and it's not choking. Choking is the act of having something stuck in the esophagus. Strangulation is completely different. And it can be done manually or with ligatures, or with their arms or legs, and it is extremely dangerous, because even for a few seconds it can cause a lot of health issues, and obviously brain damage. If it's non-fatal, it can cause a lot of health issues. It's extremely dangerous. And there's thousands of these videos of men strangling women until they lose consciousness, either suffocating them with putting things in the mouth, suffocating them with plastic bags, and strangling them, or hanging, and I mean really hanging them. There's other disturbing videos, like there's a lot of, they don't call it rape. You can't type in the word rape. Pornhub removes that term, but other words are in there. So they've got like unwilling sex or surprise anal, or words, terms like that, which are rape, but they can't actually type rape in there. But there's words so like hate fuck, and there's also a donkey punch, where men kick and hurt women, and then they punch them in the back of the head as hard as they can. I've seen women's vaginas being stapled shut, electric torture, punch fisting, women being pissed on, either in their mouths or in their vaginas or in their anuses, and they have women licking toilet bowls, the most humiliating, degrading stuff. Or the heads being actually flushed, heads down the toilet while they're being flushed and being pummeled from behind. There's also tons of incest videos with titles such as "No Daddy Stop, I'm Not Mummy," and they're dressing 18-year-old girls into younger, they make them look like little girls, and they put them in child-themed rooms with much older men, or sometimes elderly men, like if it's a granddad abusing his granddaughter. There's a lot of incest, an awful lot of incest, brothers and sisters and so forth. There's also horrible channels like called Sexually Broken, where they destroy women in every way possible. So I believe that, I mean, I have documented all these videos, which is on my website, The Violence of Pornography. I have blurred the genitalia, and it is very distressing to see, but I've put it out there because I think especially women need to see it without having to watch it themselves. I believe that pornography normalizes and eroticizes sexual violence against women, and it enables permission-giving beliefs, and it reinforces rape myths, because a lot of the time when these girls and women are being abused and raped, they also portray that the women love it. They actually love it, and they're not really saying no, they're saying yes, because they're worthless whores, and they love it. And that is very dangerous, especially when young boys are watching this kind of content. I believe that pornography should be deemed hate speech, and that it actually is a violation of the Human Rights Act, Article 3, the right not to be tortured in an inhuman or degrading way. I could talk a lot more about pornography, but most of it, as I said, is on my website, which I think will be available in the link.
Okay, hi everyone. I hope everyone enjoyed that. And yeah, just wanted to say thank you so much to Suzzan for such a powerful and moving talk. And I personally just find your work just really significant, I think, to what we're trying to do with this kind of movement. And I think obviously the work is very hard hitting and often can be quite disturbing, but I think that depiction of such a kind of extreme experience and psychological trauma is pivotal to this project, because speaking with a lot of women who have experienced sexualized violence and sexism more widely, that it's about sharing these stories, and especially in kind of creative ways to overcome misogyny together. So yeah, just thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so now we've got a few questions, and I guess firstly we're going to start off with the PTSD. So when we were chatting earlier, you mentioned that understanding complex PTSD really helped your recovery, and I wondered if you could talk a bit more about the kind of how that's helped you specifically.
Absolutely. I mean, recovery can take so long, and it wasn't until literally maybe about 5 years ago. I mean, I'm 61 now, so at that age, I wish that someone had told me earlier in my life, and that's why I want to share this, because it's so important. Because I think going through my teenage years and adult life, no matter how many times counselors, therapists would say to me, it wasn't your fault, it wasn't your fault. And I don't mean just as a child, I mean as a teenager and a young woman, because I did actually, after I was sex trafficked a couple of years later, I actually went back into pornography and prostitution. And no matter how many times I said it wasn't your fault, I still knew it was my fault. Hence, I still had the shame, the self-blame, the guilt, everything was still there. It remained. And that just, you can't ever recover whilst you have those intense feelings inside of you. So a few years ago, I learned about complex PTSD, which is different to PTSD. I mean, PTSD kind of occurs after a one-time event, say, being held up at gunpoint. I mean, a friend of mine that actually happened to her in Birmingham in a garage, or a serious car crash or something like that. And you develop PTSD. But with complex PTSD, this happens over a long period of time, especially from childhood and going to teens, as in my case, and as in many other women's cases, where you are constantly being traumatized over years. And in some instances, I mean, for me, it was every day or every other day for all those years. And each time that you are traumatized, you internalize that trauma, because especially, I think it's more significant in sexual violence, and you internalize that trauma, and you become detached. Each time someone abuses you, you become detached. And as in my case, completely detached all through those years. And so you never really feel what's happening to you. You never really feel that pain. And then what happens is, when you're, as I said, when I got to the age where I learned about complex PTSD, I instantly understood what it meant. The fact that even through my teenage years and early adult years, I was self-abusing, because the thing is, what you don't ever want to do is feel that pain, if you understand what I mean. So what you do, you keep abusing yourself in whatever way: drink, drugs, putting yourself in certain situations. Like I did, I would put myself into dangerous situations because I wanted to keep being abused or abusing myself, so I would never have to feel it, because it was too enormous. The enormity of it was too much. And unlike the second component, I think, is unlike someone who's suffering PTSD from a one-time event, they can talk about it. So if you're mugged or robbed or you know, attacked physically, you can tell people, you can tell everybody what happened to you. You can tell the news what happened to you. But with sexual violence, you can't. So that is what compounds you have all these extra symptoms, because you cannot talk about it. So I think once I understood that, yeah, it was not my fault, because in the end, I understood completely why I carried on abusing myself. And so it was amazing. And I just wanted to you know, relay that to other people, because it took so long for me to understand that. And it's so important to understand that.
I think also, like you've mentioned before about about victim blaming, and also, you know, like how for you it's normalized. Yeah,
Exactly. You don't get victim blamed if you were mugged. They don't say, oh, well, you shouldn't have worn that jewelry, or you shouldn't have carried money with you. You know, nobody says that. But if you are raped, especially obviously not children, but young girls around 14, kind of from 14 upwards, it's what was she wearing? How much was she drinking? And they don't ask elderly ladies who are also raped. They don't ask them such questions. So there's so much victim blaming of young women. It just compounds your recovery. It just, you don't want to talk about it. That's another reason you don't want to talk about it, because people are really cruel. And I mean, I can't talk about it now, and I do talk about it in my book, about the many times that I suffered victim blaming, and it's so cruel. It's awful, and this is something we need to address. We need to address this, because it is only young girls and women that are targeted. Nobody else. And it needs to be out there more. Absolutely.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess it's just like, or you know, re-traumatizing all over again, and it comes from this hatred of women, doesn't it? That then even
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Misogyny plays a large part in all of this.
yeah,
Absolutely. And victim blaming.
yeah.
Absolutely.
How are you doing with the sun in your eyes there?
I know. I'm
You're
really
glowing.
sorry about that. I thought it would have gone down by now. If I close my blind, it will be pitch black. And I was hoping it would. I'm sorry.
Oh, don't worry. It adds to the artisticness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so
And I'm on a PC, so I can't, like, if I had a laptop, I could move somewhere else. So sorry
you're
about
anchored to the spot, aren't you? So the next question is about your research on gay men's porn, because I remember you saying, wasn't it, that someone said to you, you know, what about gay porn? And
Oh, well, every time you speak out on social media, there are people who love to derail you.
yeah.
And that's one of the many things that was said to me. Well, gay porn, and I thought to myself, oh, actually that is true, because I haven't watched any. After all the videos that I watched, I thought, no, I haven't. So I'm going to have to do it. And believe me, I didn't want to do it. I really didn't want to do it, but I thought, well, it's the only way for the answers, you know. So that's what I did. So one night again, I sat down with a big drink of wine, and so what I did, I typed in, and I used Pornhub, as you know, the reasons why I use Pornhub. and I typed in the same search words that I did for the women. So that could be rough sex, unwilling sex, torture, strangulation, everything. I typed in the same search words on Pornhub's gay porn channels, and I prepared myself. I thought, oh God. Anyway, so I got on there, and I couldn't believe it. I was so confused actually at first, and I was typing these words in, and I started watching some videos, and they were lovely, absolutely lovely. These men, they were kissing. I'd never seen any kissing. They were kissing, they were hugging, they were caressing each other, they were talking to each other, they were wearing condoms, respectful. And I'm like, well, I'll probably get onto the other stuff later. So I kept typing this in, and every time I typed it in, and even like one, it was about rough sex and what have you, and it was this huge hairy guy in leather, and there was another guy, like a young guy, strapped to a cross. And I thought, oh, here we go. So he gets this whip, and but it's a cat o' nine tails, which is kind of just a soft leather, thick wide pieces, and he just gently flogs him without. He doesn't even turn pink hardly, and then he goes up and kisses him, and I'm like, oh, what? So I go through, and then torture. I'm typing in torture, and most of what I see is being tortured with feathers, tickling torture. And I honestly, I went through, I don't know how many videos I went through, and then I thought to myself, well, this is so. It's the polar opposite of how the women are treated in pornography. There was no hate, there was no degradation, no humiliation, no cruelty, no sadism, no pain, nothing. And I also I did trans porn. So I did the same thing with that, and I watched hundreds of videos, and I took screenshots, and it's on my website, and it was exactly the same as the gay porn, exactly the same. It was just caressing, kissing, respect, everything, and nothing. Even on, I did the casting couch. You've probably heard of that, casting couch. Now on the women's one, it is nasty right from the beginning, when they start calling them names, humiliating them and degrading them. And then some guy comes in and literally throws her about the room and pummels her. To the gay porn, which he's answering some questions, and then they start kissing and have normal sex. And the difference was astounding, really astounding. And I thought, well, that just proves the misogyny that is on that platform. It is virulent. It is horrific. And I'm so glad I've documented it now, because I mean, a lot of it has been taken down, as you know. Pornhub has a lot of lawsuits against it as we speak. And it took, millions of videos. 80% of its videos, unverified, were taken down. So that is good. That is some good news. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think I saw the other day that the owner of Pornhub's house got arson attacked or something, and burnt down.
Well, yeah, I saw that. Ferris and Toon. Yeah, I put him on Twitter. I found him. I found who it was, because I saw years ago, I saw MindGeek owned Pornhub and all the other ones. And I did a lot of research and found him, and found a photograph of him and put him on Twitter. But of course, nobody took much notice. It wasn't until, and I'm glad to say this, a male reporter of the New York Times took this story up, that anything actually happened when Visa and MasterCard and other companies removed, and PayPal stopped dealing with Pornhub. So I'm glad of it. I'm really glad of it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's why the work you're doing documenting it is really good. And
well, I think it was important because, as I said, I think sometimes I have a thing with images, like with my paintings. I think sometimes one doesn't believe. It's not that they don't believe. It's just that if you're just reading text, you're detached from the reality, if you see what I mean. But when you see images, it's like with the Holocaust, no one believed that could happen. No one, until they saw images and videos of what was going on over there. And I believe it's the same with everything, you know. And I think images, and that's the reason I took images, because I didn't believe it. I'd read it, but I never saw you can't see the extent of it, and how, or well, it's worse than awful. It's horrifying, the misogyny on that site, because it's not, as I said, it's not just about adults having consensual sex like many people propose and say that that's what it is. And if a woman likes a bit of rough, you know, it's her choice. It's not like that. And of course, a lot of the videos up there are not professionally made. There are millions of just, you know, mobile phone videos. So this is just men, like boyfriends, husbands. And I did document this years ago, that even like domestic abuse, a lot of it is on there. So you've got men who are abusers, who are, they're not just filming their wives and girlfriends and putting it on Pornhub. They're also doing, you know, like live cam, you know, live cams, and making money from it. So it's not just, you know, they fancy putting it up, but they're actually making money out of their wives and girlfriends who are not consenting.
yeah.
And I think that talks a lot about consent in pornography. No one can really tell if the person in pornography is consenting or not, because you can't tell if they're a trafficking victim, you can't tell if they're a domestic abuse victim, whether it's secret filming, whether it's a minor. No one can tell. And of course, Pornhub, who everything's unbelievable, but you know, like Facebook and YouTube have perhaps 20 to 30,000 moderators working on their sites to, you know, to get rid of content, illegal content. Do you know how many Pornhub had?
How many?
And we're talking millions and millions of videos. I can't remember the exact number, but millions. They had 20 or 30 moderators.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's just a joke, isn't it? I mean, you know, that's like, I think they said it was about 150 videos an hour they had to look through. An hour, 150 per hour. So they would literally just forward one quick. And then there was only English speaking. So there's a lot of foreign videos up there from all over the world. So they wouldn't even know what the title said or what anybody said, or there's a lot of silent videos. But they 150 videos an hour. How can anyone moderate that? It's impossible. But you know, it's coming to a head now, and people are finally understanding what Pornhub's about, and it's about time.
Yeah, and I think as well what you're like the comparison you made. What did you say? YouTube with the moderators?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, when it comes to porn, it's just like, oh, it's just a bit of fun, or you know, and that any criticism of it is deemed to be prudish or you know, anti-sex, and it's just like that's why you know, something that's about sex, it's just like, oh, we don't need to take it seriously. So yeah.
Well, it's free speech, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's free speech, but not for the women who are performing in these videos, or not performing. They don't even know they're in the videos.
Yeah, exactly.
And as I said, that there is so much violence on there. It's not sex. I mean, you know, we all like sex, and I've been told I've been called all sorts of names, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
You know, and they're not about sex anymore. The majority are just about humiliation, degradation, and suffering. They love to punish women,
Yeah.
and the majority are that. And they have millions of these videos with millions of views, and men who are enjoying that. Now, what is that doing? And as I said before, what is that doing to young boys, to their minds when they see that? And they're looking at everywhere, you know, in school. I mean, that's one of, you know, that's awful. And I think they should ban mobile phones in schools, because even my own daughter, years and years ago, when she was a teenager, was traumatized. I mean, she didn't tell me at the time, but she was traumatized by boys showing her, you know, violent pornography, and it's still going on, and they're getting younger as well. We're talking 10, 11, 12.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I was in primary school getting shown porn when I was like 9. Yeah.
9.
Yeah. Yeah, 9. It's just, yeah, it does have a big effect, doesn't it? So we've just got I've just seen we've got a couple of questions come through, which I will pose to you. So, oh, hang on, I don't know. So the first one that I've got is from Sarah, which says, and if you feel like this is too personal, then please feel free not to answer it, as she said. But the question is, are you married to a man? And if so, how were you able to trust him or anyone? You mentioned having a time period when you hated most people, and I'm wondering how you were able to move past that enough to have to get married and have true friendships, etc.
I never wanted to have a relationship when I was a young woman. Well, you know, late teens and a young woman in my 20s. I never wanted a relationship ever. I never trusted anybody. How could I trust anybody? So I would just like go out with someone, and, you know, whatever. I never wanted to get close to anybody or have anyone close to me. And I never wanted children either. And that's one of the things I remember. I've been asked quite a few times by people when I said I never wanted children. And they would immediately say, why? In case you abuse them, you know, and I would say no, because I didn't want to bring them into this evil world. But I finally, what happened was I met my children's father, and I found myself getting close to him, and I didn't want it. And we went through a couple of years. I mean, I didn't trust him, and I don't think I have ever really trusted him. And I had good reason to in the end. We went through hell. I mean, I even went to the women's hospital because I thought, like I said before, I thought I was mentally ill. I never even knew I was abused. Okay. And people find that hard to believe, but I thought I was a loony. That's all I ever thought, that took drugs, drank, and had a good time and hated the world. And I'm mental. I thought I was mental. And we went through quite a difficult period. And then I found, a couple of years later, I found I was on the pill since I was 13 years old. And I found myself, the doctor told me to come off because I had severe migraines. And as soon as I came off the pill, I got pregnant, which was a big shock to me. And then that's a whole another story of how an abused person feels when they have a child. Oh, that's a whole another story. And we did divorce years later for certain reasons. And I've only had a relationship once since then, and I haven't had one now since 2017. And I'd rather not. I'd rather just not. I find it hard, and it's not just relationships, it's friendships, it's work colleagues, because it affects every aspect of your life being abused. And say in a work situation, and say something comes up, for example, Mother's Day, and you're asked about your mother, and I would either just say, oh, she's dead. I mean, she's not, but I would say, or I would, I couldn't talk about her because I stopped seeing her when I was 30, in my early 30s, and I've never seen her since, and I don't want to see her. So it's things like that, things that come up all the time, it's very difficult. So I would rather be alone. I'd rather just write and, go for walks and just be by myself these days. I mean, with my cat. I love my cat. And of course, I've got my 2 beautiful grown-up children and a granddaughter, and I'm happy with that. But it's been very difficult to trust. Well, I don't. It's hard to trust people.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite understandable, I think, definitely.
It is, because even I've been abused by doctors. In my early 20s, I was abused. I went to a special place when I was 19, and it was to help you get into work, so into a workplace. And there was a doctor on site there, and one of the lecturers started abusing me there. And then when I had to go to the doctor, he closed the blinds and started abusing me. So all my life, up to a certain point, and after obviously having children and counselling, everything obviously changed from then. But before I had children, I was constantly abused. And as I said, you just detach. I didn't know. I had an inkling about being abused when I was mid to late 20s, and it took me a few years to, especially when I had my daughter. I mean, she was the catalyst really to my recovery, because I understood at that moment when she was born what it should be, how the protection and love that you have for a child, for a baby, for your baby, was so intense, and everything kind of changed from then.
Oh, I guess that's a moment of hope then, in some way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it was so hard, because even when I had children, I had so many difficult times. And even when I was in therapy, when I was 33, I'd had my second child, my son. I was in therapy, and then suddenly social workers got involved, because they knew I was in therapy for my own abuse, and I had a lot of abuse from them. It just went on and on. It was absolutely awful, never ending.
Oh, yeah, it's just I guess that's the victim blaming again, isn't it? It's just
instant victim blame. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I know things have improved, but they're not good enough.
No,
they're certainly not good enough, especially when it comes to young women.
Yeah, there's definitely a long way to go. So I guess that's why we have to keep fighting.
We do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And any of us that can impart any knowledge or understanding to younger women that I didn't get, then that's why I do what I do.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. We've got we've got maybe time for one more question. So, well, there's a question from Rosa Borg saying, Suzzan, what would you advise us to use in terms of language, in the sense of putting the onus on the perpetrator? So would you use the word prostituter to define, I suppose,
Yeah, the problem has always been about the victim, and the perpetrators are hardly mentioned. And I think it does need to be on them. Why are they doing this? And make them accountable, because it's always about the victims, isn't it? And yeah, I think more needs to be done about that. Absolutely. It's always about the victim. It's never about, you know, I mean, you know, the victims, even of murder, women who were murdered, you know, oh, was she drunk? What was she doing, you know, before she got murdered? Why was she out on her own? Why was she wearing headphones? Why this? Why that? But not the perpetrator. And why is that? And I believe a lot is to do with misogyny and thus victim blaming, because it is women too. It is women too. Women are also, or can be, misogynistic, and I've known that firsthand. But things need to change, and we all need to collectively keep fighting and keep fighting for these things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, that's the, I guess misogyny is so ingrained into all of us, isn't it, really? So yeah.
Well, yeah.
It's
like domestic abusers. It's always about her. Why doesn't she do this? Why doesn't she do that? And I know I've experienced it. My sister, my mother have experienced it. And it is, just because you're married to that person or live with that person, they can still terrorize you. And no one understands, unless they've been in that situation. You are, just because you live with that man, it doesn't mean to say, you know, oh, he'll be okay and he'll calm down and he'll be okay. It's not that bad. But I have, and my sister, for example, she ended up, you know, the worst time is to leave them. And he would threaten, he would he's broken her bones, he's kicked her when she was pregnant. But of course, when I was young and this was going on, she was only 17, 18. I was so used to violence, it didn't affect me. It was normal. And she, in the end, when she would threaten to leave, he would say he was going to kill her and the children. And finally, she left, and he actually beat her up in a spa shop, kicked the hell out of her. And nobody said nothing. Nobody did anything. They just watched or just walked out. And then when she fled, she went to a women's refuge. He came and found her and was swearing and throwing stones at the windows. Then they put her in a caravan with 4 children. And the terror that she went through, she's still not right now from his terror. And this is what people don't understand. And this is why we must concentrate and focus on these perpetrators.
Definitely, yeah. Well, thank you so much. And I just to read a couple of audience, we've got loads of positive comments coming in from audience members saying, thank you for speaking in such a direct, honest language, talking about all the torture that women and girls endure. Speechless gratitude to you, Suzzan, for your knowledge and resilience. You are an inspiration, and incredibly impactful work from a talented, versatile, radiant, fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I'm very radiant, as you can see. I'm sorry about that. But I really appreciate that. That is so kind. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's worth the hard work, and it has been traumatizing work, this especially the pornography. And I actually had to take a break a lot. Well, for a year I've had to take a break because just watching them traumatized me, and I was having other effects. For example, I would go I don't know, to the shops or somewhere, and to the post office, and I would see different women. I would look at different women, young women, elderly women, all kinds of women, and think about what, you know, genre they would be in. Every time. So what if that's done that to me? And I'm not, believe me, I'm not masturbating to this material. I'm analyzing crime scenes, because that's what they are. What is it doing to young men in particular who are masturbating to this kind of material? And then they're out in the real world looking at women in the real world. What is it doing to them?
Yeah, definitely. It's terrifying, but yeah, I guess
it is. And also, if you think, oh, there's so much to talk about. But I've researched serial killers, the sexually motivated murderers, because most serial killers kill women, right? And you can see the rise in serial killers, especially in America, in this early 70s, 80s and 90s, with violent pornography. You can see it's almost like an exact match. And they, as I said, their prime motivation is fantasy. And all sex offenders, it's all about fantasy, right? Whatever they do, whether they're going to look through some woman's bedroom window or expose themselves, or whatever they do, or want to kidnap and rape and murder a woman, it's all about the fantasy and this escalation. And what happens is, so maybe they start watching what they like to call vanilla porn. There's not much of that, I can tell you, except in gay porn. If you don't want to see violence, then watch gay porn. So what they're doing is what happens is, because they become obsessed with pornography, I mean 24/7, okay? And a lot of it is in secret, because a lot of them are married and what have you. And what happens is they exceed all pornography. So they'll start maybe with the vanilla, and then they'll go on to harder stuff, and then bestiality and once they've covered everything, that they can no longer become aroused. They get to the point where they're no longer aroused. So what they do then, and it depends on what they say, fetish, but paraphilia. It's as simple as exposure and masturbating on women. If we talk about low-level crime, but it's not a low level to the woman, believe me. They will watch every video they can on exposure, and then when they no longer become aroused, they cross the line. They then cross the line into real offending. And as I said, they actually film it and then put it onto Pornhub. And so I can't tell you how dangerous it is. And how many rapes a year are there, and sexual assaults? And I bet you any money they're rising, and they have been rising since pornography.
Yeah, it's well, I also, just to say to the audience that because obviously you've done so much research on this, Suzzan, and you're an expert on all this, so I'm gonna show the links now. I'm just gonna share my screen. Hang on. Okay, hang on, sorry, it's not, there we go. And yeah, so if anyone wants to hear more about what Suzzan's been talking about, and all her research into porn, there's her blog, the second link here on porn research. And then also, if you want to have a look at any of her artworks in closer detail, then there's the first website. And then we also, there's a link to Suzzan's book called The Rebirth of Suzzan Blac. And I saw that there was a question about, that we didn't get time to answer, about how Suzzan got out of prostitution. So I'm sure that all the answers to that are going to be in there.
They are.
Yeah. So yeah, please do have a look on Amazon. I think it's also available on Waterstones to buy. And yeah, buy the book, please. And then also we've got the so you can also read on Suzzan's blog about the legislation around introducing age verification. So if you've been affected, or you're kind of mobilized by the issues we've been talking about today, then please do have a look at this link, and all of these links will be posted online afterwards. And yeah, so this is a the age verification was passed by UK Parliament in 2017, but the government has refused to implement it. And this is a crowdfunder on crowdjustice.com, which tells you more about it, and you can make a contribution with the kind of aim to protect children from this kind of harmful pornography we've been talking about today. And also if there's any kind of parents that have been affected by the issues that we've spoken about today, then here are some resources that we think are especially useful around this topic. And finally, I just want to say, yeah, if everyone could follow us and share us stuff on social media, the links are there for our our website, our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, and email. And yeah, if you have a look on our website, we've got loads of articles talking about all these subjects, and we would love to see you at our future webinars. So yeah, just to say, thank you so much to everyone and for participating in all your questions and encouragement. And Suzzan, thank you so much. It's been amazing to have you. And
you're welcome.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you to everybody who watched,
Yeah.
and to Nordic Model Now. It's I wouldn't say it's been fun, but I think you know, but this stuff needs to be out there, and women, and especially younger women, need to understand more from us older ones.
Well, thank you for passing on your wisdom, and yeah, keep struggling, everyone. We will get there, I'm sure. Okay, well, good night, everyone. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.